Good afternoon, everybody. We're back with a bang. I'd like to welcome Chrissie de Rivas here with us this afternoon. And the subject we're going to discuss, which I'm sure will be incredibly interesting for everybody, is cryonics. And for those of you who don't know what cryonics is, you soon will. So without further ado, we'll start. Okay, I hope you enjoy it.
Shall I tell you first of all what cryonics
Yes.
is? Okay. It's often called cryogenics. Cryogenics is the general science of freezing things. We call ourselves cryonicist. We call the process cryonics. And this means that when I've finished with this bit of life, I'm going to be frozen. I'm going to be preserved in liquid nitrogen and kept in a storage tank that we call a dewar. Hopefully, one day, future technology will be able to revive me to live a new life, not in this ancient, decrepit body. If the science has developed sufficiently to thaw me out, it's going to be able to repair the cell damage that's been caused by my life so far, by whatever I died of, and also cure the damage that will be caused by freezing. I have to say that a lot of people's initial experience of freezing is what they put in their home domestic freezers. And if you put some strawberries in your home freezer and take them out again, as I'm sure we've all done at some time, you're left with a squidgy mush, which is pretty horrible. It doesn't taste much like a strawberry and looks even less like a strawberry. But if we freeze a piece of meat, a leg of lamb or a piece of steak, and we thaw that out, it actually comes out looking pretty much as it went in. I'm not talking about sort of examining it under a microscope anymore, but it does look pretty much as it went in. And I am much more like a piece of meat than I'm like a strawberry. Except my brain is probably a bit more like a strawberry, some people will claim anyway. But we try to do what we can to actually prevent cell damage. So you're not just going to dump this body of mine in a home freezer. We go through quite a complicated process first. We do what is called perfusion, which means that body fluids are replaced by a sort of human antifreeze. It's a sort of collection of chemicals which will do as much as they can to prevent the cells from damaging. See, things like, we all know about a water pipe, that when it freezes it gets bigger, the contents are bigger, so the pipe bursts. And when the water thaws again, it all leaks out of the holes. So we want to sort of do as much as we can to prevent those tubes and veins and all the rest of it from expanding when they've got an expanded frozen contents. So this is what our perfusate, our antifreeze, if you like, will actually do. It will do its best. Nowhere near perfect yet, of course, because we haven't been able to unfreeze anyone to see what they're like. If we could do that, then we wouldn't need to freeze them in the first place. So we always say the worst thing that can happen to you is that you die, and the second worst thing is that you're frozen. So if we can avoid aging, then obviously that's the ideal we're working for. Right, I've given you a rather a long summary, but never mind. I've got some questions.
Yeah. When you say, obviously the body fluids that are in your body at the point of death are removed, is that like a draining system? And then obviously there have to be, it can't be something like formaldehyde that's put through your body.
Yeah, it's the same process.
Really?
Yes, when a mortician embalms a body, they are putting, formaldehyde or whatever chemicals they're using. We're doing exactly the same thing, only instead of all of that, we're using our complex chemicals, which are sort of glycerol-based, because that, is like antifreeze.
But the substance isn't formaldehyde,
no? No, because that would be toxic. That would be very toxic.
Destroy.
I mean, some of the chemicals we use are a bit toxic, but again, we're looking at the future. I mean, a lot of people sort of say, oh, it's all pie in the sky and so on, but if you say that and you'll say it'll never work, you're saying that future technology is not going to be capable of doing things I mean, I remember the first heart transplant, and I remember the world sitting waiting in horror for the awful Frankenstein idea of somebody else's heart going into somebody else's body, and would it work, and all the rest. Nowadays, we take this very much for granted, don't we?
I remember that too.
Yeah.
And I do remember I was very young at the time, and I remember the feeling of horror.
Yes.
But then now it's like everything else. It's just a matter of course, organ donation and organ replacement is part of everyday life.
That's right.
And in fact, you know, it's pretty wonderful because it's helped thousands of people along the way to actually carry on and live their life.
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to ask is when did the first person that you're aware of actually have this procedure or have gone through this procedure? How many years ago or months or whatever?
It's 1967, as far as we know, and no, Walt Disney wasn't the first person to be frozen, and he isn't frozen now. But the first person who was frozen was in 1967, and he was, I think he was a Dr. Bedford, who actually had quite a checkered history because his funds ran out for preserving him, and he had to be moved from pillar to post and so on. So, I mean, really and truly, the chances of him being restored are fairly remote because the sooner the body is frozen once death is pronounced, then the more chance there is of some sort of success for this.
How quickly does that process have to take?
Well, if you could do it at the very moment that death is pronounced, I mean, obviously you have to have death legally pronounced. You can't just start doing your cool down and all the rest of it, because I think the coroner might have something to say about it. But the sooner the better. The head is the part, I mean, the brain is the part that we're mostly hoping to preserve. So the sooner that the head can be cooled down, the better it is. But I mean, it can be done. You can cool down to a sort of refrigerator temperature and keep the body for a little while, but not too long.
And what are the legal, just talking about coroners, quite often, as you're aware, in some deaths, it's requested, it's law that you have to have an autopsy. What are your feelings on that? You must have made some arrangements along the way, but nothing like that is to happen.
Well, we do our very best, and we have a funeral director who will work with us, and he's very good at ensuring, well, not ensuring, but doing his best to make sure that an autopsy doesn't take place. You see, there are a lot of religions that won't allow any body intrusion of any sort if you do an autopsy on various branches of Islam and some of the Indian religions, I'm not sure which. They feel that their souls are condemned forever if they are interfered with in any way, so they can claim exclusion, and in fact they can be shipped off to their own country before sunset the next day, so it does happen. Obviously, I hope it won't happen. I mean, if I die very suddenly, if I die in an accident, then, you know, there will be problems about it. I actually wear a disc most of the time, which says on it, please do not autopsy, get in touch with one of the following phone numbers and so on. See, that's our big worry. My husband's also signed up, and we always say that if we die at home, one of us is going to be fine. The other one's going to be left, and we can't always be quite so sure that the right things will be done. We do have people around, you know, friends around and so on, but if I've suddenly conked out, it's going to be rather hard to make that phone call. So one hopes that one will die in the right circumstances if one has to die.
I've got a question here, just come in. What about the idea of a soul? Can the essence of someone be frozen and revived? In other words, you know, if, as some of us believe, the soul leaves your body and all this sort of thing, if in fact in your case, would the soul hopefully be frozen with the body and then revived?
This is something that none of us know anything about. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that when someone dies, you can see something leaving the body. Now, whether this is just the essence of life, I don't know. Many much cleverer people than I have debated what is the soul, where is the soul kept, and so on. Now, obviously, one has no idea if the soul can be frozen or not. The most we're hoping is that our brain will be frozen, our brains will be frozen, that the brain patterns, the memories and so on will be somehow retained in that freezing. Now, if the soul escapes the body, it doesn't matter whether the body is boiled, baked, fried, frozen, sent up the flue, buried in the ground to rot, whatever you do with it. If the soul is gone, my soul can look down on my little body in the chili bin and sort of say, what an idiot, you know, what a waste of time. If that happens, well, okay, I'll have learnt something, but nobody anywhere knows what happens after you die.
But then on the other hand, if your soul is still floating around there and in 60 or 70 years you do come back, it might say, oh, there's the rest of my body there, I'll just pop back in there.
Why not? Yes, I think it's quite
so.
yes, it'd be quite a good thought. Another question that people ask me quite often is that it's very, very linked with religion, all of this. If your soul is going back to God, if there is a God, I don't know. I would argue that God gave us life, if God did give us life, as a very precious gift. And as chryonicists, what are we trying to do but to preserve that life? So in no way are we actually going against anything that was taught. And I mean, we have got the precedent in the Bible of Lazarus, Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, so-called. You know, there are arguments on both sides, and being a cryonicist does not preclude religion. We have a number of quite devout Christians, Jews, all sorts of different religions sort of within our movement. And
just to enlarge on that, do you actually, in fact, do you have a religious service at the death of the body who's going to be frozen? Do you have some form of, in other words, do you have a funeral as such?
There's nothing to stop you having a funeral. I've got 3 grown-up sons, and I've actually suggested to them that if a funeral is for those who left, isn't it? I mean, a funeral has nothing to do with the person who's died. It's for the people who are left, and it gives this wonderfully euphemistic closure, apparently. If they wanted some sort of closure, some sort of end, I've suggested they have a party, have a few nice bottles of wine, discuss some of the things their peculiar mother did in her life, and you know, watch some old videos and so on, and you know, celebrate the life, for goodness sake. Don't let's all be morbid and miserable because it's over.
We have a question here from Ben. Are there many people who've signed up for cryonics who've had a strong belief in the existence of a soul? And this is from Ben.
It's a bit of a personal thing, and I can't really answer that generally, but there are a lot of people, as I said earlier, who do have a belief in religion, who have still opted for cryonics. There are approximately 100 or so people already frozen. We don't call them bodies, we euphemistically call them patients. We have, because we're challenging in a way the definition of death, I suppose, because if we're saying the person is dead forever and there's nothing there, then there's no point going ahead with cryonics, but we would challenge that it's very hard to define death. Not so very many years ago, people were dead when they'd stopped breathing, but you can stop breathing for half an hour or so and you can still be revived. I mean, there have been children who've been virtually drowned. There's one child who was completely static for nearly an hour, who was then revived. And we have techniques nowadays. We all know about the resuscitation and all the rest of it. You know, so we could have said a few years ago, we'd have said, well, they're dead. Nowadays we're saying, oh, yeah, but, you know, we can maybe reverse that to some extent. We have another question coming.
We have another question. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a good one, actually. Was it an easy decision for you to make this decision to be frozen and kept forever, as it were?
Well, I hope I'm not kept forever, because that would be rather pointless. I would like to sort of actually be revived at some point. It wasn't a hard decision. I've been through quite a lot of ups and downs. I always call them my other lives. I've had quite a lot of different lives, different things that I've done and so on. And I did have a point in my life when everything seemed to be collapsing around my ears, and I actually thought, do I really want to go on with this life? I did, obviously. And I then at that point had stopped thinking about, probably about religion. I mean, I have been very religious in my times. I have visited church an awful lot. I've prayed and I sincerely believed. I don't actually believe in God anymore, I'm afraid. But having got to that point, I think it just became a fairly sensible decision to me. I mean, if I'm sent up the flue, there's absolutely nothing left. If I'm buried in the ground to rot, then there is some DNA if anybody was daft enough to want to recreate something using my DNA. But this just seemed to me, well, hey, this looks like some vague, very, very small chance, I know, but it does look like a possibility. It does look like something that could work, so yeah, I'll go for it.
A question. If we sort of go, I don't know, 200 years into the future and imagine that we've now got the technology to revive people and it all works, as it were. You've legally been dead for 200 years, your sons have inherited your money, other people have gone on. Even if they could, why would they bring you back?
Why do we want to study what people have done in the past? What's this huge interest that the human race has in archaeology? And I would become, actually, wouldn't I, a living archaeological specimen, if you like. See, I'm a novelist as well, writer as well, so I could write incredibly accurate historical novels about the 20th and 21st century. I think people would be intrigued. I mean, we've spent a lot of time looking at men frozen in ice and Egyptians coming out of tombs and so on. There has been a lot of interest in that sort of thing, and I just think that they would want to do it because they could, or because it's there, to use the old climbing.
And on a slightly different note, if they say, I don't know, 100 years in the future, they figure out how to revive the bodies at least, would you not be worried that maybe you'd be frozen, there's someone in the NHS who needs a new liver or something like that, and they might go, well, you know, we've got one on ice?
I think if they can thaw them out, they will have certainly developed the ability to grow new livers. We know that we can grow cells from stem cells already. We can grow other organs. I think they'd be much more interested in that than in my ancient liver that's stored in the body. It'd be a heck of a job getting it out, wouldn't it, as well? Because you see, we're talking about temperatures. I mentioned the domestic freezer earlier, and normally a domestic freezer runs at about minus 18 degrees Celsius. I'm talking liquid nitrogen, which is minus 197 degrees Celsius, so something that's incredibly, incredibly cold.
Can I just ask, Chrissie, is it kind of on your mind each day, or do you at some points in life think, you know, I'm going to, you must try to phrase this question, you're obviously quite optimistic to you know, be involved with cryonics. There's an optimism there about the future of technology, and the military are not going to take over whatever, you know, technology is required, and that you will come back. Do you close your eyes and see yourself in like 200 years, or in Britain, in America, or, I mean, the storages in America and you talked about, you know, you'd see your grandchildren, they'd be older, not older than you, sorry. And could you just talk through how, when you close your eyes and think about the future?
We've been talking a lot about space travel, haven't we, and space tourism. Unfortunately, we're suggesting that it's going to be way, way past my lifetime before anyone's going to be able to do it. And it's something I would just love to do. I mean, I just love the idea of even being far enough away from the Earth to look down on it. So in a way, I can see this as my way of time travel. It's my way of travelling into the future to a time when these things could be done. Now, I know that there is an awful lot of dark futuristic stories. There are an awful lot of sci-fi movies that are giving the world as something horrendous, something controlled, something even worse than the control that we have in this world now. But Yes, I think if it is so black, so dark, so controlled and all the rest, they probably wouldn't bother to revive us. And back to your earlier question of why would they want to, I mean, I think they probably wouldn't bother. You know, they might just sort of completely abandon the storage facility as far as I know. I mean, it's just part of the gamble that I take. But I just think the idea of seeing what's developed in the future, and I mean this idea of maybe we do go and live on other planets and look back on the Earth that we knew, I just find the whole thing really exciting. I mean, I'd never even sat in front of a computer sort of 12 years ago. Now I spend most of my waking hours in front of a computer, and I've just embraced that technology. I mean, I absolutely love travel. I love going around the world. I love the flight. I love the whole bit. You know, even the aeroplane foods when it comes on a little tray. It's interesting to see what you're going to get. You know, after the first time, it's less interesting. But yes, I mean, any sort of new experience. I think the day I stop being curious and stop being interested and stop wanting to find things out and ask why, then probably I'll be ready for the freezer.
Sorry, I was.
Is that a trait amongst everyone that's signed up?
A lot of people do want to know what things are going to be like. I know there's one guy who's very much into alternative energy and that sort of thing. They're quite a nerdy lot, a lot of them actually. They won't mind me saying that, but he longs to see what, you know, whether any of the ideas that we're currently bringing in. We were talking about weather, climate change earlier. He's very anxious to know whether any of the ideas have been brought into effect, and he always says he loves that idea. Someone else loves the idea of, you know, how computers are going to develop even further in the future, because they are capable of more, scaringly capable of more and more.
Actually, I was thinking about family. Obviously, you have family, you have children, and your grandmother.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying here is that you're going to be frozen at your death. You have to leave some sort of instruction, possibly, not only for your grandchildren. Your grandchildren will then have to leave instruction for their children. In other words, they're going to be saying you've got a great-great-great-great-grandmother who's currently frozen, either in, I'm not sure, is it America that they have this base? Would you like to go and retrieve her if and when? I'm serious. I mean, it's a serious question. You have to go and retrieve her. How do you think they're going to react to that? Obviously, they'll have to have a form of family history along the way to be aware of that. Do you find that a bit daunting or frightening in any way?
Not really, and I think if they found it at all frightening or daunting, then I probably wouldn't know all about their existence. So in a way, I probably, knowing me, I'd be very curious to know how many have grown. I mean, I've got 3 grandchildren, a new one arrived yesterday. I think at the moment their parents haven't really said a great deal to them about all of this. I mean, my granddaughter, the eldest of them, is 11, so she is
A bit young.
She's a bit young, really, to understand it. The others just obviously, I don't know. My 3 sons are not interested in it for themselves, but then on the other hand, they're youngish men who are nest building, they're looking after their families and so on. And not very many people actually decide what they want to happen to their body after they're dead. I mean, probably as an older person, you have thought, oh no, I couldn't bear to be buried, I'd rather be cremated, or vice versa. Can I ask you younger people, do you have any thoughts on what you want to happen to your body?
I'm cracking idea, why sign up for it?
Right, I'll give you all the details later.
Funnily enough, I was thinking along the same lines. However, I was thinking that my personal feeling is I don't think it's going to work, but I still think it's a really cool way of sort of, you know, you've got cremation,
cool.
You've got burial. Hey, why not be frozen? It's the scientific way. Even if you consider it a form of burial, it's just, you know, less worms.
Well, I think this is it, actually. I'd hate the thought of leaving a grave for someone to have to look after and say, well, we better go and see the grave today. I just find that really depressing.
Oh, aren't they going to say, oh, well, we'll have to go to California to go see the Dewar again?
No, I think they need that if they want to go. It's actually in Michigan I'm going to be. But if they do want, I mean, if they ever go to America, they might say, well, hi, we can call in at the CI and sort of have a knock on the old Dewar for Mum, but
As
I don't think they would.
As a bit of a morbid curiosity,
Yeah.
do these Dewars have any windows in? Can you actually
No.
see the people inside? Or?
No.
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 Oh, that's a shame. You want a view.
Well, in fact, you see, we'd all be wrapped up in a thing a bit like a sleeping bag inside, and then the sleeping bags are sort of strapped onto a thing that looks a little bit like an aluminium ladder, and then that's sort of lowered into the Dewar. And the head goes down, incidentally, so that if any thawing does, if the nitrogen boils off at the top, it's only your toes that get exposed, but that's never going to happen anyway, because it's all re-topped automatically.
If I can sort of try and steer it to more of a scientific angle, I'm kind of, I understand that cells degenerate once the body dies. So is there any finite limit for how long you can be frozen? I mean, could you come back in 1,000 years, 2,000, 10,000 years, or is it just a sort of a handful of years and that's your limit?
No, once all biological activity completely ceases once you reach the cool-down temperature, the final cool-down.
So it could be infinite?
Infinite, yes.
Just also in the practical set, how does it, the kind of mobile units, or this temporary, you say this temporary storage until you're actually in the
No, well, the
main
final
storage, or
cool down.
if you're in Australia when you die, or how does it
Yeah,
work?
we cool down to water ice temperature, which is about -33. I knew I'd break the camera, you know.
Fiddling.
Yeah, the final cool down is actually carried out at the Cryonics Institute. The Cryonics Institute is the company that I'm signed up with. The final bit is actually done over there. So we either have a funeral director who performs the perfusion and does the initial cooling down. We also have a standby team, which is still evolving. And at the moment, the sort of logistics of getting everybody from the standby team, I live in West Cornwall, so it's an awful long way from where the equipment is in Sussex. So we're reliant on other people. And I think the thing will be that we will get a local funeral director when our time comes.
I have a couple of questions here for you, Chrissie. One is, would you be frightened waking up 200 years late? And the other one, concurrently, is, do you envisage whole families applying for group freezing?
There are one or two whole families. There's always the point when the child is old enough to make their own decision, that the parents will sign them up so that if they die prematurely, they can be frozen. But it's just a matter of choice. I mean, my husband has elected to go ahead, and so have I. So, I mean, we're a sort of family. There is a family of 5 that I know of who've signed up. There are an awful lot of single people. There are males or females who have elected for it without their husband or without their partner agreeing to it. So, all sorts of people, really. Absolutely individual choice, yeah.
Just one quick question. What's the number you have to write on the checkbook?
At the moment, I think with the exchange rate being as it is, it's something like £20,000. But if you're relatively young and you take out a life insurance policy, I mean, it's a sort of bottle of wine a week, really. It's not actually that much. I mean, as you get older, obviously the premiums are that much higher for a life insurance policy, but it's very easy to do it. You also have to allow for the cost of getting you to the States, which can be up to another 8,000 or so. So, I mean, £28,000, I mean, it sounds an awful lot, but as I say, if you do it through a life insurance policy, there are various ways that people do it, but you don't have to pay till you're dead, which is also...
We have a question actually on our computer.
Yeah, it's a long question, so I'm going to read it directly. Let's say the idea of cryonics becomes extremely popular in our world. As a result, 1 million people sign up to be cryopreserved. If we have 1 million individuals preserved, will that lengthen the overall time it will take to revive people because of the tremendous number of cryonauts?
Cryonauts, yes, that's a nice one. Well, probably, yes, I suppose. One has to be logical and say, yes, it would. But I think it's very unlikely that you will ever get those sort of numbers wanting to be preserved. I mean, it's been going since the 60s. as I said earlier, we have about 100 and something patients already frozen, and there are something like 1,200 other people signed up for it. So over, what is it, 30 odd years, it's not really that many, is it? In fact, that's 40 years, isn't it? So it's not that many, and I honestly don't think it's ever going to catch on to the extent that it's more than we can cope with. I mean, we have
small exclusive club.
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting when you wake up, though.
It'll be fascinating.
Because what amazes me is what arrangements do you make for your financial future when you're brought back to life? How do you cope with everyday living? What kind of, because, well, obviously...
What do you mean? I'll be on the sun, probably.
Life as we know it right now is going to be vastly different in even 100 years' time. Well, so therefore, how are you going to earn a living to sustain your lifestyle?
Well, I shall talk about what life was like now, won't I? No, I think I shall... I think I'm a fairly adaptable person. I've done so many different things in my life. I mean, I've sort of completely changed careers, and I've accepted all of this. I mean, the changes in 50 years. Just think about that. And it's hard for you guys, but 50 years ago, I can remember the day we had a telephone installed in the house, and it was a big clunky Bakelite thing, and you lifted it, and this voice in the distance said, "Number, please," and you sort of thought, oh, you know, I mean, it was really, really strange. Now we're all walking around with a little thing clutched to our ears all the time, which we take for granted. I mean, my 8-year-old grandson can do far more things than I can. I would have been able to do at his age, but I've just grown, I was saying about computers, I've grown into accepting them. And I think that you will grow into accept things. I mean, we have problems with food, don't we? I mean, some of us were sort of saying that, where's the sandwich gone? You know, the piece of bread and piece of ham in the middle of it. Now we have sort of ciabattas and baguettes and goodness knows what else. But we do sort of accept it, and we do cope with it. And I think, I mean, there'll still be things to do. People will still presumably sort of earn some sort of living doing whatever they do. I mean, I've been a teacher for most of my life, so I mean, presumably I can adapt and use the skills that can be called. Do you know, I thought I'd give up teaching, and when I marked the exam papers, I realised I had. Sorry.
I have another question here. When do you think the desire to live forever actually began? Which is, it's not really a question of you're not wanting to live forever ever at the moment. You're looking forward to what's going to happen to you when your life here is over, and then you want to continue it, if possible, in the future. So, but when did this idea for Cryonics really start with you? And when did you become seriously involved with it?
Well, for me, I've been signed up for, I think it's about 11 or 12 years now. So, I mean, I was just about 50, I suppose, when I started thinking about it. I didn't really know about it before, but I think I might have been interested before in some ways. I sort of feel when one looks at films, there have been so many films. I mean, Vanilla Sky and Demolition Man and Forever Young, all the rest of it. All of these films all involve cryonics. All the space travel films use cryonics. Good old Red Dwarf had a form of suspended animation. So, I mean, it is something that's very much in the public space. A lot of people think it's science fiction, but it isn't. It's science fact. It is happening. There are an awful lot of myths associated with it. Most people will know what it is. So, I don't know. I mean, the desire to prolong life or to live forever or whatever else started way before the Egyptians started mummifying their kings in pyramids or whatever. Yeah.
I'm just going to say hello to Ben, who's watching and joining in Chicago. So we're really glad.
Oh, hi, Ben.
Chrissie, I'm sure will say hello, Ben.
Hi, Ben.
Enjoy the program.
Chrissie, initially, didn't cryonics come into being related to people young or middle-aged that had an incurable disease? And the thinking was that they would basically die and the bodies would be frozen. And at a later stage, a cure could be found for that disease. Wasn't that the initial
Well, I wouldn't say it was the initial thinking. I think Robert Ettinger was the first person who really was the father of cryonics. He was the man, he was apparently injured and he lay in his hospital bed during the war, early part of the war, and he thought through this process of freezing and he thought this could work, and he sort of developed his ideas and so on. He eventually wrote a book called The Prospect of Immortality, and that was looking at the, you know, all the possibilities associated with it. But I think what you're saying, that came into it as people did start getting terminal illnesses, and younger people too. The only problem is that people will seize on it as an emotional thing, and it is a big problem that we do face. I have to liaise with a lot of people in Europe, and when somebody dies suddenly and it's a big shock, they think, oh, we'll get them frozen and so on. Now, if you haven't made your arrangements prior to that, it is immensely difficult to do so. There are legal requirements, we touched on that earlier, and it is a big problem, particularly for us at the Cryonics Institute, to actually be able to take on board all this last-minute hassle. We just can't get the paperwork sorted out in quick enough time. So if anybody does think about it, you know, think about it when you're in a rational state of mind and not sort of emotionally torn, because it is quite a big decision. It's quite a lot of expense, quite a lot of money, and you know, it's something that needs to be planned for, I think. And of course, the other thing is that there was a case of someone who had a child who died of a terminal illness very young, wanted them frozen, and then there was some sort of cure, not completely discovered, but it was on the way, and they demanded that the child was unfrozen again so that they could, you know, sort of have the cure. But you know, it ain't like that.
No. Have you studied, are there any risks at all? Like, take for instance, where you die and when you die, who's around and what's this? Because I think there's a time limit, and from the time you die, there's a time limit between 4 and 6 minutes before your brain dies, and it's irretrievable. And does that come into it at all?
Well, it does really, yes. I mean, as I say, the quicker you can start the process, the better. But unless you're sort of knowingly sort of reaching a terminal state, you can't really begin that process. I mean, if the doctor can pronounce death as a bedside vigil almost, and then the process can start straight away, then that will be the very best you can hope for. But if it's left for a long time, I mean, the best we can do is to actually try and cool down the head. The bags of frozen peas, if all else fails, you know.
Is there any state at all, if at death, where the body remaining would not be suitable for cryogenics?
We can actually opt for a freeze under any circumstances, or there can also be a don't freeze me if. We can say all of that. So I mean, if it, you know, if my head got run over by a steamroller, well, it would be up to John to decide whether he actually wanted to bother to freeze me or not. And I would think it would be a bit of a waste of time, quite honestly, but there are people who say do it whatever, and that again is a matter of personal choice, personal.
So if a person or a body has to have, and the death results major surgery, then really it's not really advisable, isn't it? Is it for them to go for cryogenics?
It's up to them. I mean, it really is the decision of those who are left. I mean, I think John has actually said, I'm speaking on his behalf, I'm sure he's watching, he'd probably correct me, but I'm sure he said freeze whatever happens. Go for it, whatever happens.
Well, we've got a question from Chicago here. It's from Ben. Do you think someday the cryonics organizations will unite as one organization, or would this be a bad idea for them to unite? And there's another question here. You mentioned a child. What's the age range of people currently frozen?
I know that the oldest person is in his 90s, and I don't actually know what the youngest is, I have to say. You see, we always maintain a great degree of confidentiality because there have been one or two big prominent cases which have caused an awful lot of discussion, an awful lot of argument. Some of the family didn't want it to happen, some of them did, and so on, and it caused endless problems. So I don't honestly know is the reply to that. I mean, I know that the oldest one was in his 90s, as I say. Regarding the linking together of the different associations, there are two major cryonics providers. One is the Cryonics Institute, which is in Michigan. The other one is the Alcor organization, which is in Scottsdale, Phoenix, Arizona. We have a number of conflicting ideas. Alcor's prices are very, very much higher than CI's prices. And I'm not treading on anyone's toes. They will say that they offer a superior service. I, as a loyal CI member, will say, well, I think that our service is as good. And I wouldn't enter into those sort of arguments anyway. I think it would be a good idea if we could have more cooperation between us. I mean, what with 1,200 members throughout the world, we're hardly in a position to start really sort of scratching each other's eyes out. So I would actually like to see, I have a lot of friends who are signed with Alcor. I've visited both facilities. I've visited the Alcor facility in Arizona. It's, it's nice and shiny. It's very well organized. It's got shinier dewars than ours. It's got a very nice reception area. Ours is fairly basic. I actually sort of said it's a bit like a B&Q, empty B&Q warehouse with the dewars sort of stored around the edge, and they're fiberglass dewars rather than stainless steel. But, to me, it's what's behind it all that's more important than the pretty face.
Well, we have another question here. What's your view of neurosuspension compared to whole body suspension?
Right, the neurosuspension is when just the head is preserved. A lot of people feel that there's no point in preserving the whole body. They might as well just preserve the head. And therefore the head is surgically removed or detached, and the head is then frozen on its own. I mean, that's fine. If you haven't got a lot of dosh and you want to sign with Alcor, you can just have your head frozen, and then again, using future technology, you can have your body grown. Well, I don't honestly fancy that. I mean, I don't particularly like my body, but I'm sort of attached to it, and I intend to remain that way. And I think, actually, one of the things that I would find very, very difficult, it's rather like this idea of someone who's lost a limb, who feels the phantom limb there forever. And I have a feeling that even if someone put a prosthetic body on the end of me, I think I would still suffer the same sort of loss, the same lack of body. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't like the idea of neurosuspension, but for those who choose it, good on them.
I have a feeling this is from your husband. It says, John says, definitely freeze, whatever. To do anything else suggests that you have knowledge of the future. No one has.
Absolutely, yes. I thought you'd say that, but yes. I don't know. I mean, I suppose in a way he will freeze me, whatever. So. Yes. Excellent.
Earlier on, Sissy, in your early statements, you made a point that the reason you'd go in for this is to get rid of this weary old body of mine. Is the thinking behind that when you brought back your body, there'll be a means of regenerating your body?
Oh, definitely, yes. I mean, at the moment, the research is going on very much into growing new organs. So if you've got damaged organs, then that will be replaced. There's a subject called nanotechnology, which is the manipulation of cells at molecular level. And this is, I suppose, what our current thinking is, that nanotechnology will be able to manipulate all these cells. So even, the tiny, tiny cells in I don't know, in your fingernail, all of those should be able to be repaired. And the idea is that a nano machine, which is a sort of something beyond our comprehension, it's so small, will actually be able to sort of replicate itself and replicate the body, replicate all the cells in the body. So yes, I mean, all my damaged bit and my arthritic knees and all the rest of it will be nice new working knees.
Well, on the organs part, they're already well ahead, and they're they are doing now, the Mozambique are.
Absolutely.
They're making it. But would it be a gamble to say that when you come back they can renew your organs, but your general body, is there a gamble that
I don't think so. I mean, I think the whole thing is a bit of a gamble, I have to say. I mean, it's, you know, there's absolutely no sure and certain knowledge any more than there is in the funeral service. There's a sure and certain hope. And I mean, that's what we have, the sure and certain hope, and it's just a hope. And yes, they'll repair all of me, I hope.
So I suggest, just to go a bit deeper, is it a comfort thing then, or if you don't seem to believe that you're going to be, forgive me, but I don't think you really believe you're going to be brought back to Tracy. Is it then a comfort thing? Is it a really useful? Just repeat that. Oh, sorry. So just, you know, it's been fascinating. Just, you know, we're firing lots of questions at you. Just try to gauge, get inside you and see, if you really believe that you're going to come back in 100, 200 years, and if not, is it more important that it's a comfort thing, so you've got a better life at present, as opposed to, you know, you admit it's a gamble, it's a risk, and it's a very, I don't know what percentage you're putting on it, a 1 in a million chance that you will come back. Is it?
I suppose, yes, I do hope I'll come back, or I wouldn't be doing all of this. But I would also say that if I don't come back, I honestly won't know anything about it. So it's not, I'm not particularly looking forward to dying. I mean, I don't want to die in the least little bit. And I can't say it's a particular comfort. I can't sort of say, oh, well, it's all right, I will come back. I mean, all I can say is, well, I may come back and I may experience all these things. I mean, nobody is ever quite ready to die, even if they say they are. I don't honestly think many people are actually ready to die. And I just keep finding new things. I mean, I've only been writing for 10 years, and I've still got to write a bestseller and a television script and all the rest of it, and I might not have time for all of that. And that's what bothers me most of all, that there are still so many things I want to do. And I want to do me space tourism as well. I won't have time for it all in my lifetime. So this is it's my little optimistic thing that says, well, maybe if I do come back, that sort of thing could be available to me. And to me, it's very well worth that gamble.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, in one respect, I suppose it's a miserable question, really. But is there a time limit as to how long you are actually or can be stored for?
No, absolutely not.
This is no time limit?
No, there's no time limit. You don't sort of pay to be frozen for X number of years. You pay to be frozen until technology can revive you. And if technology never does catch up, which I honestly doubt, I mean, I think technology will catch up, then, you know, you're there for good. And unless there is a bomb that obliterates the entire world, then, you know, everybody else will be in the same boat.
This again, it's a hypothetical question, really, but I think it's one that will bother me. You obviously have some sort of contract, and it's for divinity. It's a never-ending contract. But what guarantee do you have as a person that that will actually be kept in place? Because you're not here to check it.
No, but I mean, it's just something you have to take some things on trust, like we put our money in the bank and we sort of trusted it will be there for us to get out again, and sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, sometimes banks can go bust. And I mean, we can only, you know, just sort of rely on the company. I mean, I do trust the integrity of the company, and we have very good staff, you know, who do their best to ensure that it will go on.
Well, I think everybody will agree it's been a very interesting discussion. I think we've learned something. And sorry, Kath, you should have shouted.
Chrissie, it's a practical question. You're paying out so much money for the transport to America and everything else. Do you get any guarantee that they'll give you a diary when you come back?
I'm making a video, or at least vaguely making
a dowry.
A dowry.
A substantial sum of money.
Well,
to
I should be looking for a new millionaire, won't I? And I'll just hope that John.
But no guarantee from the insurance.
No. Oh no.
Sad.
It is sad, but you couldn't take out such an indefinable insurance, I'm afraid.
Any more questions before we close? No? Well, thank you very much, those online who've joined us. It's been very interesting, and thank you very much, Chrissie. It's been really fascinating.
It's been my pleasure,
and
thank
a pleasure
you.
to meet you, and I hope
Thank
we meet
you.
up again in the future.
Well, I hope so.
And that's from John and I, both of us, everybody.
Thank you.
Pleasure.